Hello, everybody. Today I would like to talk about the Angel Island, uh, the immigration center of the Angel Island. And before I would like to talk about the detail of this topic, I would like to first start off with the general background during that time period. So we're looking at the time of the late 19th century and to the early 20th century of the United States. And during this time, a lot of immigrants came to the U.S. because of, according to our textbook, is because of the growing prosperity and the promise of political and religious freedom, which these elements they attracted waves of immigrants after the American Civil War. So following this wave, a lot Chinese immigrants they came from China to the U.S. to seek for a better life, and most of them they came to California and settled in cities like San Francisco, and they came between 1879, which is the year of the start of the California Gold Rush, and 1882, which is the year that passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. So this is the act which ended Chinese immigrant for nearly a century, and a lot of these Chinese immigrants they became a target of discrimination because white people, whether they were white Americans or they are white immigrants from Europe country. They saw the Chinese stealing their job opportunities, and because there's a lot of immigrants by that time, so there's not much occupation for this large number of people, so they have to compete for these job opportunities. So they think they stole their job, and there's a lot of anti-Chinese riots broke out throughout the country, especially in California, and they demanded for exclusion of Chinese immigrants from the U.S., and that led to the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882. So we've talked about the general background of this topic, and I would like to move on to talk about Angel Island itself. So the Angel Island Immigration Station is located in the San Francisco Bay, and it acted as a very significant tool of oppression of Chinese immigrants in the U.S. history. So it is an immigration and deportation facility, and it started working in 1910, and throughout its history, it detained 175,000 Chinese immigrants in total, which is a lot of people. And under such background of the Chinese Exclusion Act, most Chinese they were actually not allowed to came into the U.S. Only some people who fulfilled the criteria, like they working in some specific jobs, or they have relatives, like they have their parents they are in the U.S. They could enter the U.S. to meet their family, but so most of them they are prohibited from entering the U.S. And so a lot of the Chinese immigrants, when they arrived in San Francisco, they were inspected aboard in the ship, and they were later sent to the Angel Island Immigration Center, and there they were further inspected of their identity. And this is a really important process, because a lot of the immigration authorities, they find out a situation where a lot of Chinese people, they try to pretend they were someone's daughters or sons, so to gain the access into United States, because of the effect of the Exclusion Act that I've just mentioned. Most of them, they are not allowed to enter the U.S. unless they are they're working in some specific occupations, or they were someone's daughters or sons. So these people were called paper sons, paper daughters, and in order to find out who's paper sons and paper daughters, the immigration authorities, they use some really harsh method, like interrogation and beating of them. So they're being really harsh, and I would say it's inhuman to them. And a lot of the immigrants, they were they were held captive for months and even for years in the Angel Island Immigration Center. So they were not allowed to leave, and they were kept there for years. And so a lot of them, they were hoping for a new start and a new life. They have this hope in there, but when they arrived at the coastline of San Francisco, they found themselves held captive in the Angel Island. So they lost their freedom, and I think this is a very inhuman way of treating them. And most of the reason why they're treated like this is because of the discrimination toward Chinese during that time, because a lot of the Europeans and some first-class passengers which arrived at the San Francisco Bay, they were treated differently than these Chinese people. They were allowed to enter San Francisco almost immediately. So under comparison, it really showed how harsh they're treating the Chinese people. And here's the photo of the immigration center. We can see that it's located on the Angel Island. And there's also a photo showing they made some Chinese, they carved poetry on the wooden wall, to show their sorrow for their situation as they are being held captive inside the immigration center. And that's a really dark history for the Chinese Americans. And I think this topic is quite significant, and I think it's related to what we've learned about the late 19th century or early 20th century US history. And I think this history of immigrants is very important. It's a very important component of the history of that time period, and it provided a different perspective for us to look at this history in this time period than what we were used to. So we're used to look at this time period in the perspective of a lot of white Americans, but through this we we could try to use a different perspective to look at this time period. And I think this is a really significant topic for us to discover. So this is the end of my presentation, and thank you for your listening.